So, welcome. I'm going to be talking a little bit, doing my introductions before we get started on the project for today. First and foremost, I want to just thank you for being here, and I also want to thank God for allowing me to be able to do this, for giving us this technology. So, I'm going to take a moment to pray. Lord, we thank you for this day, Father God. I thank you for the people that are going to be watching this video wherever they are. Lord, I ask that you bless them, Lord, and that they may be able to learn through what I can teach, Father God. I ask that you bless my hands, Lord, and that you help me and guide me today as I create art. Lord, I thank you for your wonderful grace and love over my life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, as you can see, I'm outdoors. This is my back patio. I was really excited to do this class yesterday because we had great weather, and I left some of the stuff, it's covered. I left some of the stuff out here. Yeah, and this morning it must have rained last night, and it is yucky back here. It's kind of sticky, and some of my stuff was kind of wet. But we're gonna go forward with this. So, let's talk a little bit about what this class is going to be. And by the way, this class will later on, I will be editing it and putting it on YouTube for anybody that wants to watch it later on. So this is going to be basically mixed media, which, what does that mean? It basically means using different types of media, different types of materials, and in this case, to create art. Today, we're really going to be using, because of the time, and this is the first class, we're really going to be using either canvas or paper and gesso and paint. So we're not going to be adding bits of paper to the canvas and magazines to this art piece like I normally do. But when I do some of my mixed media creations, I incorporate all of that. And they usually are not finished in one sitting. I work on the backgrounds one day. I sometimes let them sit and dry for a couple days or weeks until I get inspired again. And then I add more stuff to it. So, but today we're going to be working with gesso. So I'm going to be showing you some of the materials. So this is Liquitex heavy duty gesso. All right. I have regular gesso, but I have it inside and I'm not going to be using it. But if you are following along and all you have is regular gesso, hey, that's perfect. I gotta say, I used regular gesso for the first 2 years until I discovered this baby, and now I love it because of the texture. I like that thick texture, and I like how it feels on my brush once it's dry. But I don't use it for everything. I still use regular gesso for some of the projects, but for this one in particular, I like this one. But if you have regular gesso, no problem. What else are we gonna be using? If you have palette knives, so I have the good ones and then I have these cheap ones, and I tend to, for some of my projects, for this in particular, I use these plastic cheap ones, and I use my metal ones more for when I'm painting portraits or big paintings with acrylic or oil. I use those. And then these I use for my mixed media, like my journal pages or for something like this. So it's up to you. This is basically to scoop the gesso and lay it onto your canvas or paper, and sometimes to make scratches. So what else are we gonna need? You're gonna need a brush for later on, some type of brush to add some paint depending on if your project dries or not. All right, and then you're going to need canvas. I have these mini, I think these were 10 by 10 canvases, could be wrong. I didn't bring my ruler. Or you can, all right, and then you're going to need canvas. I have these mini, I think these were 10 by 10 canvases, could be wrong. I didn't bring my ruler. Or you can use watercolor or Bristol paper. If you don't have canvas at home, and I wouldn't use a big canvas for this project until you get used to what you're doing, okay? These, Michaels has these. Sometimes they sell packs of 8 by 8, sometimes 10 by 10, some by 12 by 12. And they're packs, I think, of 8. And they're rather inexpensive, and they're great if you're practicing techniques. Hi, Edie's, how are you? And they're really just a lot of fun. They're good canvases because they're reasonably cheap to practice different techniques and textures. Or if you want to create like something like an accent for your room. Anyway, I like to buy these packs to practice and create small art. All right, so I want to show you the other material that you can use. If you don't have small canvases, you can use something called Bristol paper. They sell this at Michael's or Blick or basically any art store. I believe Walmart sometimes carries it as well. Or you can use watercolor paper. Now, I love to watercolor, but this isn't a watercolor class. But I buy watercolor paper all the time, especially when it's on sale, just to have it to create, other than watercolors, to create textures on it because it's pretty thick paper. So what I want you to do is I want you to decide if you're going to use canvas, that's fine. I have one of my canvases here. And if you have paper, take out the papers, at least two that you're going to use. Now, I'm going to use canvas and paper. I'm not going to use a Bristol today. So I'm just going to leave that there. And then you should get some cardstock. If you have any colored paper, this is craft paper. It's kind of thick, so it's not like regular butcher paper. And so this is good because when we do the imprint, we're going to imprint some things onto the gesso. You're going to have gesso stuck to whatever you're using to make the imprint. And instead of throwing that away, if you have other papers around, you can kind of like stamp it, use the gesso to stamp, and you create layers for other art that you can use later on. So this might not be art that I'm going to create today, but I'm going to leave it right in front of me so that when I'm stamping the discard, I can clean it off on these papers. Now, also, what you can do, and I think it's going to start raining soon, is you can get some magazines, some magazine pages. Yes, it's raining. Hopefully it doesn't rain. Let me push my stuff. Hopefully it doesn't like windy rain. All right, so I just tore out some magazine pictures from Vogue. And I'm just gonna have a couple. I really like this one, it's colorful. So these I'm just putting them there as discard sheets. So when I clean off my paint, I can press it there instead of throwing away the paint. Sometimes when you're creating art, you'll have leftover paint. And that way, if you have extra sheets, you can just rub that paint that's on your brush onto these extra pieces of paper, and later on you could use them. All right, so we're gonna get our palette knife. And remember, this gesso that I'm using is the very heavy one, okay? So since I'm gonna be putting this on watercolor paper, it's a lot thinner, so I don't wanna put a lot of this. But I'm going to be doing like a thin layer of the gesso all over the paper. Now, as I'm doing this, things for you to think about if you want to try to follow along or do this afterwards, is we are going to be leaving like imprints, all right? Think about when you're walking and you're wearing boots or whatever you're wearing on your feet, even if you're barefoot and you're walking on mud. If you're walking on mud with heavy boots or even your bare feet, what happens to the mud? What do we see on the mud afterwards? Will leave an imprint, right? Your boot or your footprint will leave an imprint on the mud. So I want you to think of the gesso kind of like mud, white mud, even though they sell black gesso, and that's a lot of fun to use. Okay, right now I'm just making lines. Can you guys see it correctly, or should I move the camera? Yes, Sania, you could buy this. Well, you could buy regular gesso at Michael's. I don't know if the Michaels by our house, because we live close to each other, has if they have the heavy duty. But like I said at the beginning of the video, you can use regular gesso. I just really like this heavy gesso. All right. So think about it when you're walking on mud, right? You're walking on mud and you're having heavy, you have boots or bare feet. What do you see on the mud if you look back? You see your footprint, right? So if you think about it like that, right, it helps you understand kind of what we're going to be doing. So there's some lines, that's okay. I'm going for texture. So what I have here is I want you to think about, so here I have different types of scraps. So you can, like I said earlier, before you start doing this, because I don't know if you're doing it with me or you're going to do it later, you can gather around your house stuff that you don't care if it gets ruined, okay, mind you. This is from the dollar store. This is from a meat pack that I washed very well, and I use this for everything. This leaves great textures. This is a piece of burlap. As you can see, it has paint on it. Then this is like this little ball that I got on it, so now it's just dirty my gesso because it had paint. I'm gonna press it down. I'm gonna stand up and press down. And remember I told you about those discard papers that we have over here in front? My magazine papers, my extra little papers up there. I'm gonna lift, and I have gesso on here, and then I'm just gonna press it. And you see how it starts? So remember, this is the discard paper. This is what we're working on. But you want to be able to use those discards for maybe a collage piece later on. So now I'm going to put this one on this colorful magazine. All right. And I just want to show you what's happening. So you see how there's like little color, it kind of looks a little dirty. That's because that piece of scrap that I had paint already stuck to it. So if you see the texture, you want to have those little bumps, right? You want to have those little bumps, and you want to kind of add more texture. So now I'm going to rub this ball thing, and as I rub on it, it creates different marks on my gesso. And this actually looks very cool too. So now I'm going to press the burlap, and you have to, depending on the thickness of your gesso, you have to kind of press hard because the whole point is to make a mark on it, to make that footprint. This is what you'll do. You will apply the gesso. Now, because the canvas is actually sturdier than the paper, it's like if you're spreading icing on a cake, right? But remember, the thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. And you kind of want to make sure your gesso is dry depending on what you're going to do with it next. Okay, and remember, we're creating texture. Sometimes I have an idea in my mind of what I want to create. Sometimes I have no idea. It just happens. So it just depends. So at home, I have an area. I have various areas. My whole house has turned into an art studio. Poor David. Like, I've taken over the house. I have my art studio. Then in the living room, I have another area where I paint. And then in the backyard, when we bought this house, the people that owned the house before had like one of those outdoor, it's not a kitchen, but it's like an outdoor counter with drawers, I guess, for their barbecue stuff. So I used all the drawers for my gel print station and to keep my print stuff. So yeah, I have stuff everywhere. All right. So one thing I do want to tell you now is you can add color to the gesso if you wanted a colored background. That's a completely different technique, but you can do that. I'm not going to show that right now because that's not the project for today. All right, I'm going to use my second favorite texture. Do you remember where I said I got this from? I got this from one of those meat packs. Obviously, I thoroughly washed it. I think it was meat or it was, yeah, I think it was meat. I think it was meat or strawberries. Anyway, as soon as I saw it, after I, took the, I think it was meat off of it, I knew that this pattern would make a great print. So I'm going to show you what happens next. Okay, so I'm going to press down. And it's almost like when you have a little bit of resistance. So you see that? And now I have the gesso on this, so I can take my extra paper and press it, and I get these marks. That's a great idea, Michelle. I've never done the essential oils to the gesso, so I have to try it. I have done essential oils with some of my journaling pages, but for me. But sometimes when I create this and then later on if I sell it, I'm worried about people's allergies. But I have like I have a journal that I don't know what I was doing, something with Christmas smells, and I put it, and every time I open the journal, even though it's not a whole Christmas journal, that page still smells like Christmas. So that's a great tip that Michelle is giving. All right, so I'm going to keep pressing and making the different textures. If you have children in the home, they really like this project. They really like it because it's fun. It's messy, it's fun. These were like little, I forgot what this is from. But I keep all sorts of bits and pieces of stuff. So I'm going to hold it up like that. You see the little circle there? And then I have this magazine page that I'm using, and I'm going to press on it. And now I have this big circle. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but if you've been to my Etsy shop before, you might have seen that I sell handmade bookmarks and also handmade journals, which are completely different from my paintings. It's like I have like two things going on. I enjoy both. Some people tell me you got to pick an art style, but I just really can't. I really enjoy both. So these little magazine pages and discard papers that I'm using, I can later on use for those journal pages that I sell on Etsy. It depends. When I'm doing journals and books, I have like a week that I'm dedicating to that, and I only do it like every couple of months because it is very time consuming. So I'm just adding these circles, and you can only add them while while this is still wet. Yes, Sanya, your class will have a lot of fun. Just make sure that you wash their hands thoroughly afterwards. All right, now this is, when you go to the dollar store, I like to go and find textures there, not just for this, but for my gel prints. This is in the beauty section. I think it was some sort of scrubber, but they have like a pack that's $1 of different things, and these make great little dots. So I'm just gonna push them in and then put these little dots onto the magazine pages. All right, so I don't know if you could see, but I have a bunch of different textures going on right now. The last thing I wanted to show you that's kind of fun, and I would have taken you for a walk with me, but it's raining, is twigs. And this is something also fun to do with your children at home or at school. Have them go outside and collect items for imprints, okay, to make these little footprints on the canvas. This is a twig that I found in my backyard, and I've used it for multiple things. That's why it's different colors. But you can just scratch into your gesso, okay? Whatever marks you make on your gesso, when they dry, they're going to stay like that. So just know that. Sometimes, depending on what I'm painting afterwards, if I know I'm going to paint florals or like a forest, I sometimes make those lines on purpose to give it like that linear, um, hi Curtis, welcome, that linear texture. So that when I apply paint and inks, what happens is the ink especially falls into the grooves of these lines, of these textures. So it's really cool. So you can use, oh my gosh, I forgot what this was, a piece of stick, a twig, okay? And you can create art with this. You can also make like circular stuff. This one, I'm not gonna add circles to it, but you can if you want to. All right, so I'm gonna set this aside because now this has to dry. And like I said before, depending on how thick you have the gesso, it depends on how long it's going to take to dry. That's why I'm leaving one that I did yesterday, that I just started adding some ink. I left it on purpose. Things you could do. All right. So does anybody have any questions, first of all, before we move on to the next step? So one thing you don't want to do, okay? You don't want to, let's say, do an imprint. Think about it like footprint in a mud. Think about this as being mud, and you're putting something down and then lifting it up and then applying to your discard papers. Okay. So you don't want to leave the imprint overnight, because what's going to happen when you wake up the next day, that stuff is going to be stuck to your gesso, and that's part of now your art piece. It will now become a collage. So make sure you lift, okay? And then some of these, like that I used, I have like little, gosh, I have like a collection of disposable containers. Like nothing gets thrown away in my house now. And I use them all the time for mixing paint, for collecting bins of items if I'm sorting for something. But later on, after this class is over, I will wash these. I will let them soak so that the gesso doesn't completely ruin some of these textures, because I like using them, okay? So if there's no questions, we're going to move on to the next part of the class, which is painting. Some of you would say that that's the fun part, but I kind of like the gesso part too. So I'm going to close the gesso. Remember, you can use all sorts of things to make imprints on your canvas or paper. Remember, we did both. So my paper is going to take a while to dry because I'm outside in the patio and it has begun to rain. And those of you that live in Florida, you know it's very humid, so it's going to take forever. And I'm going to wash this later, my little spatula. All right, so you can add leaves to this and make leaf prints. You can add fruit prints. If you're familiar with gel printing on a jelly plate, it's kind of the same concept, except there you also transfer paper, like magazine images, and sometimes you leave those overnight. You wouldn't leave anything sticking to this. So now we are going to think about the colors that we want to do. Now, in this case, we just want to create like a simple sort of abstract painting with the texture, seeing some textures in the background. So think about 2 or 3 colors that you like. I have like a little box with some of the stuff that I like to use, okay? Color wheel, super important, unless you have a color wheel branded in your head and you remember. At this point, I know what colors sometimes complement each other, and sometimes I draw a blank, and sometimes I just like the color combination. But I find that these are really handy. I used to use them when I taught art at school, and I found that they sell them in Amazon, and they sell them really cheap in little packs. So I kind of have one in the studio, one in my other area of art, one in my overalls. I have a bunch, okay? These just come in handy if I get stumped. I think that's thunder. There are other things that I use. These are inks and real branded in your head and you remember. At this point, I know what colors sometimes complement each other and sometimes I draw a blank and sometimes I just like the color combination. But I find that these are really handy. I used to use them when I taught art at school and I found that they sell them in Amazon and they sell them really cheap in little packs. So I kind of have one in the studio, one in my other area of art, one in my overalls. I have a bunch, okay? These just come in handy if I get stumped. I think that's thunder. Michelle, how's the weather where you're at? Because I know Sania is in Homestead, so it's raining too. All right, so these are other things that I use. These are inks, and these are from Liquitex, and I believe that these are water soluble. Let me check. No, these are the acrylic inks, sorry. Because I also have water soluble inks. That means they react to water. These will not, and they'll be permanent. Okay. I have this. So this I bought when I bought my big scanner that I use here in the house, and it blows. Okay, it's to clean the dust off the scanner, but I found that it's really good to blow. Where are you at now, Michelle, since you're freezing? So this will help blow the ink or watered paint around your paper or your canvas. It's getting loud. So. If you have a straw, you can also use a straw. These are Jane Davenport. Like, I swear, I'm gonna be so sad when I run out. Oh, okay, it's really cold over there. Oh, but Lake City is beautiful. I was there a couple years ago. All right, so these are like watercolor paints, but very vibrant in markers. I really like these to use as ink. Okay, and I'll show you in a bit what I do with these. So let's think of the color combinations that we want to use. So some of my favorite color combos are pink with hot pink and black. Yes, that's her, Sania. That's who it is. I also like blue, green, and white. And I like the hot pink with pinks and yellows on this today. So I have pink, hot pink. I had already dripped some of the yellow ink on this. Now remember, this is one that I did yesterday, so it's already dry. If you're following along with me and you try to add ink to that wet gesso, you're going to have the gesso colored with the color of the ink you added. So you really need to wait for the gesso to dry unless that's what you want. But I'm just letting you know because it will become like cream. Okay? So I want to add some pink. I'm going to get my brush. And you should have your water. And now we're going to kind of work quickly. Let me squeeze some of this pink onto. Now, I like to use golden pink for my paintings, like my bigger paintings or the paintings I sell, but since this is practice, I'm going with these artist blocks from Michaels that are relatively much cheaper. These are also really good for journaling. And I'm going to add a contrast of color with this. Oh, this one is brand new. Any questions about the pink? So my mom gave me a bunch of these containers that she washed out, and I used them for all sorts of stuff. All right, so I'm going to activate my brush and wet it a little bit. And I'm not really having a plan of where I'm going with this. All I know right now is the colors I want to use. All right, so I am going to start with one of my darker colors with the hot pink. Okay, and I'm going to pick an area on my painting that I'm just going to do like a stroke. Okay, so I'm going to flip it like this. Okay. So right now I'm not going to brush it in too hard. The first thing I want you to see is you can see those X marks, those triangle marks from the texture that was there below, which we like that, okay? So pick an area that you want to paint and pick the colors that you want to use. If you're just getting started to painting or mixed media, you might just want to pick two colors. Don't overcomplicate it. Like two colors and then white, or two colors and black, okay? So I am just going to go around the paint, the little canvas, and just add hot pink to different parts. And for when I'm doing these type of texture paintings, like I have my good brushes to paint, like if I'm just painting like oil paint or a portrait. But for backgrounds that are going to be rough, I use these thick, cheap brushes from Michaels, because sometimes they get ruined with these textures. And you kind of want it to be like a little scratchy. All right, so I'm just going around it. All right, so now I'm going to clean my brush. Sometimes you don't want to clean your brush because you want to mix the two colors. Oh, good, the rain kind of is subsiding a little bit, so you can hear me better. So now I'm going to add this color over here. It's called Aqua Green from Artist Loft, but it looks like teal. And this is a very different color, okay? So it's not pink. So I'm going to look at my canvas and see where I want to add it, where I think it makes sense. And because this is kind of like an abstract background, it doesn't really matter. I like this pink and blue when I buy these Artist Loft. When they mix together, you get this really cool, let me see if I can do it better. Let's see where I can add it, because I want you to see the color that they kind of make. It's like this purplish tone that I use a lot in some of my, you see right here? I like that purplish tone. I use it a lot in my mermaid books that I make and in some of my bookmarks. So now I'm just creating random splotches. And the good thing about acrylic is if you don't like it, you can always cover it up. So now I'm thinking about the edges of my painting. I think I want them, I'm putting some of this teal color, but I think I want them to be black. So later on, I'm going to add some black to those. Checking on the time. Ooh, we're running out of time. All right, so now I'm gonna add some of the light pink. I'm cleaning up my brush. Yes. And I'm just gonna add, this is what it's looking like so far, okay? Now, when I create these abstracts, because I don't know how long we'll have, but I sometimes will leave the background layer, like after I finish, and leave it alone, and then I will create something on top, and this will become my background layer. Or sometimes I like the background as is, and I can add some words to it, or just leave as is. It just depends what you feel like doing. So now I'm gonna add the pink to some areas. And it's kind of hard to tell from the camera, but I'm purposely, I don't want to cover some of these marks that I can still see from the gesso prints, okay? So I'm not gonna cover those. And I'm gonna add some black to the edges, so I'm leaving it like that. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of pink in some areas. I wanna leave some of the white showing through. Some of the parts where the teal is still wet, the pink is interacting and it's giving us a nice tone. I like that too. These colors just make me really happy. I like bright and colors that make me happy. And we all need a little happy in our lives right now. You guys are making me happy that you're on. Okay, so now I'm gonna look at it from sometimes, you're so funny. Thank you, Michelle. So now when you're creating like sort of these abstract pieces, you kind of have to like step away or stand up to kind of get the color composition in your head and see like what's missing. So I'm gonna stand up and kind of look at it from afar to see where I want to add what. So this is what it's looking like right now. Now remember, I do want to add some more ink to this layer, but I have to wait for it to dry, because if I add ink to it while it's still wet, it's going to mix, the ink is going to mix with the pink. Let me get some black. Hopefully I brought it outside. Okay, so this is golden black. So these are the golden paints are usually the ones that I use for like the paintings that I sell, the bigger paintings, some of the portraits. I tend not to use it for my journal pages just because they tend to be expensive. But for these, I will use them. Golden just has really good products. What can I tell you? Their paints are super strong pigment. Okay, so I just need a little tiny bit of black. And I'm also gonna get some titanium white. Titanium white is a great color because it is very opaque, okay? So if you are working on something that you want to make, whatever color you want to make it like not see-through, you can add that titanium white. All right, so now I'm going to clean my brush again. We were going to do an hour class and it's already 11:51. I think we will run for another 10 to 15 minutes and then I will call it quits because I don't know how long it takes. Thank you, Edie. I don't know how long it takes on Facebook, but then I will post my final painting, whatever I feel it looks like, on Instagram and Facebook. Okay, so now I'm taking the edges, and if you have to go and you have to sign off, that's fine. I might just continue, okay? Because later on, like I said, I'm going to be posting the video to YouTube. All right, so I'm taking just a little black just a little black on the tip of my brush, right? And I'm kind of darkening these edges. I kind of want that little bit of a grunge effect, you could say. So I'm kind of just going like this, brushing it down from the tip. And then later on, I'm not committing to it yet, so I don't want to make it too dark. I just love, 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 love these colors. And I know you can't really see the texture like I can, but it really does look beautiful. So I'm just going around and adding some darkness. And then later on, I'm going to bring in some white as well. Now, if you're going to create something like this and then later on you want to hang it up on your wall, one thing I'll tell you to do is after you finish, I don't do it before. Bartow's 3 hours. Oh, okay, it's kind of far. Hi, Patty, welcome. So you're going to go around the edges, and then later on, we'll add some white. Right now, we're not committing too much. I just want to kind of have this kind of grunge look on the sides. What I was telling you is, if later on you're going to hang this or whatever you're creating to hang on your wall, or if you're doing it on paper, it's different because you can always put it in a frame. Remember, what I'm doing here, you can also do on watercolor paper or bristle paper. The watercolor paper is what I did this texture on earlier, but I have to let it dry, so I can't do it on that. Is paint the edges all around in black so that when you hang it up on your wall or in your room, it looks finished. Or some artists will take the color that's on the corner and drag it all the way to the ends, okay? It's up to you. All right, so now I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna see where I need to bring in more of the black so that we have contrast in the eyes. And remember, this really is going to probably be an abstract piece, but I'll tell you what starts happening with some of these, at least for me, okay? I'm one of these people that even when I was a small child, I would look at things like cracks on the walls or cracks on tile or whatever, like weird objects. And I could see that the object looked like something else. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, if that's ever happened to anybody else. Like sometimes you're looking at like a wood fence and the grain itself looks like something else. So sometimes people call that like right brain thinking. When we're seeing with our right brain, we're seeing creatively. So when you're creating these abstract pieces, sometimes you don't start with an idea, but as you start looking at your piece, yeah, Bartow, Michelle, that's what it's saying. As you start looking at your piece, your eye might actually start making sense of some of the things. Like they might start looking like people, or they might start looking like trees, or they might start looking like buildings, okay? And sometimes when that happens, I will, exactly, the artist's eye. You got it, because you're an artist too, so you have that same eye, girl. So sometimes when that happens, I will take a moment, look at the painting, and go into a different direction, what my eye is telling me, okay? Sometimes I don't, okay? But when I do create backgrounds, and sometimes I'll do backgrounds with just mixed media, and then set them aside. And I'll leave them at home, but I won't put them away. Like I'll have them like in my, not my studio area, but in my living room area. I have another kind of studio where I paint big paintings, and I'll have them up looking at them every time I go to the kitchen or whatever. And eventually something will start coming out of that, and I'll be like, you know what? That's good for a ocean creature type background, or that's great for a girl's face, you know. So sometimes I just look at those backgrounds and they inspire me to create more art on top, or they inspire me to create something else separately. Okay, so right now we're just kind of leaving this abstract, and I'm just going to drag a little more black. And now I'm definitely going to clean my brush really well because I want to add some white. And because I had black, you know what happens. We'll get gray. Ooh, it is like a steam bath right now. Michelle, enjoy your coldness in Lake City because right now it's a homestead steamy day. You know what it's like, girl, when it's been raining. And I feel like right now I'm getting like a steam bath on my face. Okay, so now my brush is clean. Now I do have spots of white, which are basically the gesso that was underneath that I didn't paint over. But I want to add more white to some of those black edges. So I'm going to stand up. Like I told you, sometimes with these pieces, you need to look at it from a little bit of a distance to know where the colors make sense. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to look at the piece. And I'm going to bring some of the white. Now what's happening is I might have to wait for the black to dry because the black is still wet. So you see what happened there? It's turning gray. That's not what I want. I want it to be white. So I'm going to wait. And then I'm going to add some of those white marks to some of these edges. I think I have to wait a bit. So while I wait a bit, I just want to show you some of my favorite color combos. So these are little journals that I make. And I sell some of these journals on my Etsy shop. Now these, I don't. These are like my personal one. In my Etsy store, I usually have the thinner ones. And I also have my online art gallery at noeliamontanerart.com. Right now, what I have there are just like my paintings. And some of those paintings you'll see are mixed media. Started off something like that, and then I painted something on top. And on Etsy, I have more of my handmade crafts and journals. But I wanted to show you this journal. So I want to show you some of the color combinations and just what you could do with mixing colors together. Like, I love these reds with the yellows. I think it looks awesome. Let me see. I'm now sweating. I have sweat dripping from the humidity. This is a dryer sheet, yes, which I mixed with paint. Okay, and then these are little marks. This is kind of what I wanted to get to later on today with this, but we have to wait to dry. Let me show you. On see like this, the background was kind of like crazy, but then I felt like there was like two heads, so I went ahead and just painted like two faces, and I left it like that, and then later on when I want to, I can add the faces to that. I really like these color combinations. I'm just showing you this so that when you do this project at home, you can look at some of the color combinations that really pop. And let me show you another book. Eventually, I will do a journaling class, like how to make your own art journal using a vintage book. This is from an old book that I got at Salvation Army, and I use the pages. I still use the pages for other projects, but the book, like I took out the guts and I made it into a art journal, and then I sewed in the pages. So you see here, this is kind of what I really like this. You see, and this is kind of with the mixed media in the background, and then later on, the colors started looking like a house, so I took black pen and I drew the house. So I just wanted to show you some of the things that you can do with all of these abstract colors. Your imagination is your only limitation. I can't even stress that enough. And journaling is so much fun. All right, let's check and see if, okay, we're gonna go for 10 more minutes. Hi, Debbie. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Okay, so we're gonna add some more white now. I think the black is dry, hopefully. And we're just gonna add, okay, that black over there is great. It's still turning gray. Right now, we're just going around the edges and so my black is still kind of wet. So I have to kind of wait because it is so humid out here. Okay, thank you for coming and saying hi. All right, so my idea with this, once it's dry, is that I'm gonna add some white to the different parts so that when you're looking at it, you have the black around the edges and then some white, okay? Some spots of white. And when you put this on, if you have a flat brush, you can do like strokes like that. For these type of paintings, I like these flat brushes, okay? We're not doing details right now. I like these flat brush marks a lot. All right. And that way, since the paint isn't really dry, I can just go like that. And I can start seeing some of those gesso marks that we made that are dry now pop through. All right. So you just go around the edges with black and white or whatever color you want to do the edges. But I really like the darkness. Thank you, Debbie. I really like the darkness on the outside. I feel like it frames the picture, especially since this is a small canvas, right? Now, when we look at a canvas like this, you can later on turn it whatever way you want and decide which way is right. And you can, like I said earlier, you can put words on it later on when it's dry, or you can take black pen, or not black pen, like black Posca pen, which is acrylic paint in a pen. It's an amazing product, but they're kind of expensive, and draw the image that your artist eye sees and draw it on top, kind of like the little houses that I showed in, where was it? I don't know if it was this book. In this book, okay? Or you can write a word, like you can get the word faith, and maybe you want it to be a reminder of your faith, and you can cut out that word, that letter. You can pick out letters from magazines and paste it on top, and that could be just what your art is, like a little faith canvas, or it could be pray, like I'm wearing on my little tag, or it could be like a little quote, and you can glue it onto the top and call it a day, and that is your finished piece. One of the things that we're not going to have time to do now because I'm not finished is spray. Okay, so they have acrylic sealant. So for your paintings to last, like, for you to protect them, you want to always, once you're done with all the layers, you want to add spray to coat it. Okay, so I do that. I really do that with all my paintings. I don't always do it every day because sometimes I'm working on a group of paintings, and so I might do it like once every 2 weeks or once a month. That out here I'll put all my pieces and I'll spray them so that they're protected. Okay. All right. The last thing I wanted to show you, and what I've been forgetting to show you is at the beginning of the class I told you we have to have little. Okay, Sanya, thank you for joining. I would love to see what you do with the kids in school. These magazine pages that we were using as discard. When you have leftover paint, if you have other pieces of paper, it's starting to rain really loud again. You want to have these scraps of paper around you because you want to add, like when you clean off your brush, you want to kind of clean them off on these pieces of paper because later on you will have like some sort of crazy mess of color. Yes, thank you, love you. I would love to see what the kids do. And then later on, you can use these and cut these into bookmarks, tags. It's just a lot of fun. And that'll be another class that we do later on. So I'm just adding some of this leftover paint and kind of like crazy strokes to some of my magazine pages. All right, so the last thing I want to do is, like I told you, I have these inks. So I'll try to show you the ink I'm going to use. The Jane Davenport, man, her products are fantastic. I don't have a plug. I wish I did, right? But I do like her products. These were the mermaid markers, and like my pink is completely used. But what I want to show you is I'm going to drip some of this glue, just a little bit, okay? I don't use these as markers, I use them as ink. So I'm going to face the camera, and I'm just going to, because I want to show you what the point of that textured background that we started was in the first place. So I'm just going to add, and I know it looks like I just messed it up, right? And then I'm going to get my little dropper. And I know some of you have to go because I said the class is only going to be an hour, but I'm going to finish the project. And then later on, I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel, which is Noelia Montaner Art. So if you have to go, I totally understand. We've run over an hour. I am now adding water to the ink, and I'm going to move it around. And down here, I have white paper that on purpose I keep, because then I can use this for something else. And I'm going to block some of this ink with some of these magazine pages. So now I have these really cool, like nothing goes to waste. It's really stunning. Alright, so now I am going to add some water, but I'm going to get the brush. And I'm going to kind of control the flow of some of this ink. And with my blower, I can blow it into place. And if I have too much ink and I want to lift it up, of course I can have your paper towel, sort of like lightly pressing. And then you can take a look at it and see if you like it. So I kind of like it because the ink goes into the grooves of the texture. But I don't like this mark here, so I'm going to kind of lighten that up. Just taking some water in the brush and just lightly moving that around. If you have a blow dryer, you can also use, but I'm outside. If you have a blow dryer, you can use the blow dryer to dry it so that you can move on to the next step quicker. I'm going to add some acrylic. Now, that was watercolor ink, okay? So it's washable. Now I'm going to add some white acrylic paint. I just love that my first FaceTime live is like a pouring rainstorm. I'm going to drip some of this white on the top. And I'm going to add some water and let it drip. So I'm just going to put a little water into each bubble. And then I'm just going to let it, and I'm just hitting Now, you can see that this kind of changed the painting. I could have left it the way it was before, but I just wanted to show you the different techniques that you could do on these textures. And like I said, this is acrylic ink, so it won't interact as much like the watercolor ink did, okay? Where it mixed, when we put the glue, it interacted with the other layers. This is kind of laid on top. That's the difference, okay? Obviously, the water affects it, but not as much. All right, so I'm gonna just take a look at it now. I'm gonna stand up and look at it from afar, and we're getting ready to wrap up the class. And I'll show you the final piece afterwards once I'm done with it, because I do have to wait for some of the edges to dry. But I'm gonna fix what I don't like. Remember, it's acrylic paint, so you can fix it. I don't like that this right here is so dark. I just don't like that. So I'm gonna lighten it, and I think I'm gonna take more of my pink and just brush it on there. And you just kind of have to look at what you're doing and see what you like and what you don't like, you know. And once it's dry, I think I'm gonna add more white, but I have to let that dry. All right, so this is where I am for now. I haven't finished it. I have to wait for it to dry to finish the edges. But I just want to thank you so much for everybody that joined my first Facebook online class. I had a good time. I had a good time interacting with you, even though I can't type because I'm talking. I hope to do more classes like this. And yeah, if you want to check out some of my art, you can go to Etsy.com. And my Etsy shop is Noelia Montaner Design, and you can see some of my artwork there, and some of my handmade journals and bookmarks. And if you want to see some of my paintings, you can go to my website at